get tired of that. Recording in progress. Okay, so how this will work is I will introduce you, Julia, and then you can take it away. Rula, are you going to start the timer on your end, or would you like me to run?
Yeah, I can do that. I can do that.
Okay. All right, I will start introducing Julia. Julia Yusupova is a PhD student in the Philosophy, Cosmology, and Consciousness program at the California Institute of Integral Studies. 15 years ago, after learning how to meditate, she began to experience an abundance of intuitive phenomenon, predominantly clairvoyance, precognition, and synchronicity. Since then, she has been studying these experiences phenomenologically and developing a thesis which integrates them with the modern class of electromagnetic theories and consciousness studies and the emerging science of biogeomagnetism. Throughout this time, an arts-based research practice on synchronicity had also grown itself, which now utilizes a novel method of collaging spontaneously captured photographic resemblances between images acausally related in short stretches of time and space. Julia resides in Toronto, but travels the world collecting stories and experiences that aid her work. Whenever you're ready, Julia, please take it away.
Thank you so much for having me. Art and archetypes share a special connection. For one, both have been described as deep-seated human instincts. Our predecessors used to paint images onto cave walls and carve objects out of stones. Thus, they molded reality into representation. In fact, the same instinct to turn the physical into the symbolic eventually evolved into written language itself. Some tribes also participated in rituals of pretend killing of an animal image just before an actual hunt that followed in order to manifest the same. They were tapping into numinous image repetition, which is a core characteristic of archetypal phenomena. Interestingly, many artists also tap into such image repetition when they use metaphors or allegories or present regular objects in novel ways for our perception. Carl Jung used image repetition to define his concept of synchronicity. A subjective image, such as seen as a vision or a dream, would be followed by an objective situation or a physical event that carried the same symbolic motif. But before Carl Jung, there was also an Austrian researcher named Paul Kammerer who defined his concept of seriality, and here he applied image repetition to solely physical events. So it's with seriality in mind that I would like to introduce you to my research method of studying synchronicity that uses photography. I've been studying synchronicity for nearly 15 years, and it all began when I learned how to meditate and started to experience increased intuitions, clairvoyance, precognition, and all kinds of synchronicities. And in the past few years, I started noticing synchronicities in photos that I take of my world, the world around me, and my surroundings. And thus, gradually, an arts-based research program evolved for me. So now I'd like to present this to you. So this was how it all started. One day, while biking through my city, I came across this freshly painted mural shown on the left. Half an hour later, back at my house, I was suddenly struck by this view from my balcony window. The same bright pinks and purples, and the same angle in the cloud line. The resemblance felt uncanny and seemed to communicate the alchemical phrase, as above, so below. Alchemy and Hermeticism were of course known for the doctrine of resemblances. Connections between similar images were explained not causally, but through the law of correspondence, a type of symbolic correlation of meaning. The storm in the picture was actually turned into a tornado that touched down in a nearby city. So I felt a nudge towards the deeper connection between the raw environmental forces and the collective unconscious. Nowadays, I'm writing a PhD thesis integrating geomagnetic fields, Schumann resonance, and electromagnetic theories of consciousness. Collective unconscious stored in such earth fields rather than just the biofields of individual humans might account for phenomena like synchronicity that extend outside the body. From then on, the image doubling continued to occur. In this next instance, I went kayaking one morning. Later that afternoon, I passed through Greek town in my city and noticed a mural of the Greek goddess Athena. But only later, when I saw the two photos side by side in my phone gallery, did the resemblances jump out to attention. We are standing in the same pose and holding a long spear-like object in the left hand. This is a prime example of an archetype channeling through unconsciously, because I had no conscious knowledge of the coming image of Athena when I posed for my kayaking photo. Of course, one of the main definitions of an archetype developed by Carl Jung was that of a mythological character or personality. For example, on the left is an illustration of an angel my friend made for my poetry book, and on the right is a random photo of me on a bicycle. Notice the bundle of resemblances, which are the tunnel of light, the same angle of the body and the head, a headband or a headpiece, and stripes everywhere, like on my shirt and pants, the angel's scarf, the bicycle spokes, and the tunnel itself. The two images are not always separated by a short period of time. These ones were separated by years in time, but the resemblances were nevertheless noticed in a close alignment in space. I was browsing my photos when my book was just resting on my coffee table, open to the particular page of the illustration. So there's a great variety of how these juxtapositions jump out to attention in the first place, whether the unconscious connection is noticed in the moment of experience or only years later. Here's another example. I used to practice Muay Thai as a martial art. So on the left is a photo of me winning a fight, and on the right is an artwork of this magical being I had framed in my house for a long time. Notice the connecting motifs, like the green tank top, patterns both on the shorts and the skirt, the potpourri of things both in the art and on the pattern on my shirt, the overall grayish-green color of the wall behind me and in the artwork, and us standing in a similar pose and holding an important object in our right hands. So the nature of various perceptual categories like color, shape, number, angle have been contemplated in neuroscience, psychology, philosophy, and art. They highlight the way the mind forms wholes and objects. In map and graphic design, the doubling of information using such visual variables is also a semiotic technique. So to me, it seems like a communication from some more encompassing panpsychic form of intelligence or the unconscious. And at this point, it was also becoming obvious that there's always some type of visual art involved in these visual image doubles. And I think visual art composes a very complex, spatially compact, nonlinear language. So it's a good form of communication. And there are times you can completely feel this panpsychic higher intelligence and decipher some characteristics of its personality. So for example, I was visiting New York City and took the selfie on the right. Only about a month later, when looking at this picture, I noticed the two brown signs on the bike trail behind me are in perfect alignment, forming horns on my head. So even more hilarious was that the day after the photo was taken, I purchased this tank top of the Devil Child from a vintage store shown on the left. There's an obvious repetition of the horns, the color red, similar position of the body, just reflected along the vertical axis, and the same type of look in our eyes. Whatever it was that caused the image of the Devil Child to retrocausally be channeled through my photo that day before certainly had a sense of humor. And it's not just through my selfies that these entities come through. Here, for example, on the left was a public artwork displayed downtown Toronto. And on the right, a digital version of a divination card that popped up on social media about half an hour later. The resemblances are the purple and teal shawl on Ganesh and the same colors in the curve of the bubble, the roundness of the mandala and the bubbles, as well as the overall stocky posture of Ganesh, repeating the shape of the bubbles. The character that comes through, of course, makes these experiences special. Here it is a well-known spiritual deity with an inspirational message, so you feel a form of mystical guidance. It's always special to receive synchronistic instances of classical artworks because of their immense cultural significance. For example, here in this photo, the one below, it shows a view I once saw while on a hike in a forest. I noticed this orange leaf that looked like a face and snapped a pic of it. Now, for one reason or another, I happen to have The Scream by Edvard Munch downloaded on my phone. And a few days later, this alignment of one image on top of another in my phone gallery was what specifically drew out the resemblance. Do you see how the V-shaped tree branch aligns perfectly with the dark shapes in the background of the painting? And the screaming face is perfectly vertical over the leaf face. Even the skinnier branch on the right resembles the curve in the water, and the big green leaf on the left, the floor of the bridge. But it's the kind of resemblances that might have never been noticed if the images didn't happen to sit one on top of the other. And so you wonder, how does this happen? Does the art image somehow infuse into my unconscious and then acts out completely below my awareness to find and create the perfect photo? Here's another recent example. You may have heard of the wildfires in Canada that have been producing large amounts of smoke in the past few summers. I live in Toronto, so I took 2 photos of the blazing red sun early one morning, when the smoke was acting like a color filter. Earlier that week, I happened to also read an article on dimensionality by the famous painter Paul Klee. So something intuitively told me to look up some of his art, and as I did so, I found 2 paintings that matched my photos. In the left couplet, there's the gray industrial atmosphere, the red sun in the middle, and the tower sticking up underneath it. In the right couplet, there's the orange sun and the angled airspace between either 2 trees or 2 buildings. Apparently, Klee was known for including big red and orange circles as focal points in many of his artworks. In this next example, I was inspired to take photos of the raindrops in the air one night because they were leaving these long paths in pictures. This one particularly on the left IX, the Roman numeral 9. Half an hour later, I stumbled upon this nearby building on the right. The neon sign at the top also had the Roman numeral 9 and blue lines. Returning to these visual variables already mentioned, you will often see a bundle of several elements like blue line and 9 in one photo and one object, and then there's spatial separation in the other photo. This, I think, resonates deeply with the binding and differentiating properties of consciousness, which is a hot topic in modern consciousness studies, and can be resolved with electromagnetic theories of consciousness because we're talking about energy and energy blends. Another example, on the left is a meme I saw on social media. On the right is an old photo that it immediately reminded me of. Sure, this is more of a memory than a synchronicity, but synchronicity too is a short-term memory. You see the second image, and then you remember the first, just not from so long ago. So in this photo, you see I have a shirt that has the exact same tie-dye pattern with the same colors, which I'm wearing in the photo. But it's also the roundness of the planet and my earring, which baby Vivian is emphasizing by holding it up. My photo also contains the same palette of colors as does the earring, if you actually look close. And now look at the 2 light splotches on the planet and on the wall behind us. They are angled in the same way. And so there's a repetition of colors, shape, position, and pattern bundled into one object in the artwork and diffused throughout different objects in my photo. So this leads to all kinds of theory. First, it seems that reality is permeated by some energetic medium, something like what the ancients called ether, that is able to store traces of images as memories. Then these traces can suddenly apply themselves as filters over new events. But it can also be described as archetypal projection. I am projecting the image on the left into a new setting and the image spreads through different contexts and objects. In my paper, I also discuss the concept of 5D consciousness because what synchronicity does essentially spatializes linear flow in time, creating 4D images, but it's too long to get into that here. An image I once took while hiking on the left, and painting by the visionary artist Alex Gray that popped up on social media in the next few minutes. The repetitions are the golden flowers, the sun rays radiating outwards from the center. But zooming in under the branch, I also noticed a small light artifact that looks like a blue eye, just like the eye in the paintbrush and the small fractalized eyes in the flower in the painting. So interestingly, some of the synchronicities began to show through photographic light artifacts, turning into different symbols. And the message from this whole experience seems to be that of holography, which uses light to encode the whole into every part. And this final example also relates to light. My friend's room had this spinning light bulb that projected moving colorful circles on the wall. A pink circular light hit the corner of the wall just as I snapped the photo and turned into a pink heart. I'm also wearing the heart symbol on my shirt, and on the left was a card I pulled earlier that day out of an angel divination deck that I use. The heart symbol is one that I see especially frequently in synchronicities. So as you can see, my method uses visual art, photography, and narrative. It is autoethnographic and artographic. It is intuitive and yet still logical. It's grounded in psychological image work and steeped in participation mystique. To date, I've collected about 300 such photographic instances that group into different themes, like characters, motifs, and symbols, plants and animals, tarot cards, photographic light artifacts, aurora borealis, and such. And it's constantly delivering new intuitive information for each experience that helps me form theories. You can find this work and more theoretical work on my website, juliatusupova.com, and my other projects include the research on clairvoyance, precognition, and spirit photography. Thank you so much.
Perfect timing, Julia. Thank you so much for that. Julia, I do have a question for Julia. I've been trying to kind of formulate, and I think I'm there. So I was very curious. I started thinking at some point, I think you mentioned doubling, and sort of that motif occurring in your waking life. And I thought of the Jungian analyst Marie-Louise von Franz, who talked about when doubling occurs in dreams, you know, obviously these things vary, but it often means something is about to come to consciousness. So I started thinking about, if we were to apply this to your work, do you feel like when you have these moments of sort of imagistic synchronicity that it's like leading you somewhere else, or you're stepping into something new in yourself or in a relationship? I'm just curious how you connect that doubling and that mirroring with your life and your sort of personal process.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is coming to consciousness is the archetype itself, because Jung defined archetypes as present, stored, let's say, in the realm of the unconscious, the collective unconscious. So for most men, these are like old collective memories, right? And as an archetype rises spontaneously on it's autonomous, so it acts on its own will. We can't direct it most of the time. It acts spontaneously whenever it chooses. It arises to consciousness. So each one of these experiences that I presented was the whole archetype acting out through the stretch of time or space involving both images. And yeah, so as it rises, it activates something, some new knowledge, it brings with it some new intuition, because it's multidimensional, right? It's, as I think Christian was saying, it's in that realm, that pre-space realm, that's where the collective consciousness exists. And as it rises, it compresses or integrates into our own dimensions. And this is why we get these weird experiences that are acausal. They're not subject to linear causality, you know, like the Newtonian science where the billiard balls or one thing affects another in space. We have these meanings that connect different locations in time and entangle, right? Different things. So, and that is how an archetype acts. But yes, every time it brings some kind of intuitive knowledge. And besides it being, for me, precognition and clairvoyance, the more internal kind of modality, was more personally involved. I learned a lot, like my own kind of individuation, what I should change about myself, how to not bring in bad visions, how to direct it, that kind of thing. That was more internal, whereas these synchronicities for me, they bring more, basically, they always bring some kind of a theoretical understanding towards my work and consciousness studies, towards my thesis. So that is, I would say, their main goal, what they bring with them.
So they're leading you kind of in a different direction as opposed to the more internal sort of precognitive or almost, psychic kind of experiences.
Well, no, they are connected. These modalities are very connected because precognition too is image doubling. You see first the
See it before it happens.
and then that comes true usually within 24-hour period, right? But then even then I ask myself, why the 24-hour period? And then you start to understand that maybe that has something to do with the cycle of the rotation of the Earth, right? Because I study it more in like the spatial, physical level of natural sciences. I'm trying to integrate a lot of natural sciences with psychology, right? So I would say it's guiding my work. It's guiding my thesis, my actual, which is my purpose in life. So. And that relates, I think, to Era's work, which I think is great, activating intuition for students to, crystallize, to constellate what is their actual purpose or what is their work. So.
Are you're muted, Rilla?
Sorry. Julia, thank you so much, all of you, for the wonderful presentations. If I may jump in, just a curious question, like out of the moment and also out of what you just mentioned about precognition and all that. I've read since morning that there's a geomagnetic storm that's about to hit the Earth today and tomorrow. So how does that affect precognition or synchronicities or any of the other, such phenomena?
I haven't noticed any particular intensification in synchronicities or clairvoyance. I do get a lot of headaches, pressure headaches, and
yes, because I get that too.
My heart and things like that, and that is because, Heart Math Institute, for example, is doing very innovative research with the heart field, electromagnetic field of the heart, which is scientifically proven to extend like 3 or 6 feet. I think it's 3 feet around the body. So we already have this aura that is, science is saying it's real. Consciousness, one of the leading theories is electromagnetism. While, most scientists are still stuck studying the neurons, but a neuron is not a visual image. Like there's a disconnect there, right? But if you're thinking electromagnetism or energy, at least holographically, you can imagine an image as a hologram. So there's more of a connection here, right? So we need to be moving in that direction in studying energy, because energy mediates between the physical world and the spiritual world or the psychological world. It's both. And there's a lot of physical properties of energy that resonate with how energy binds. It can bind into one space, for example, right? Whereas matter can't do that. And there's a lot of effects that are repeated in this kind of energetic quantum philosophy or theory that you see exactly happening in synchronicity on the physical level. But in terms of, I know that like a lot of people are actually watching the Schumann resonance is also spiking and that kind of thing. And I think it is possible that the Schumann resonance integrates or binds with our own biofields, because it is at, I think it's 8 hertz, which is the same frequency as our theta waves, brain waves, which have been proven in meditation. These are the ones that increase. So it's like our interference with the geofields intense, and this is how I think this is the key, is that we bind with these earth energies, basically.
Oh, thank you so much. That was fascinating. Thank you,
I just
Julia.
wanted to add a thought to that from a psychological point of view is certainly the experience that we know humans go through when there are these shifts in the magnetism of the spheres can affect us in ways that have to do with being anxious, irritable, the full moon experience, etc. I think what's helpful to us as therapists is being able to draw a client or a student's attention to the fact that they're not just living separate from these forces and fields, that we're all one, and that we're all connected to these dynamics, and we feel them deeply.
And just to add briefly, there's a whole science in biology where now we're studying living organisms all over the world and how they respond to geomagnetic fields. They all have their own cycles, and you see the same kind of coral reef, for example, blooming on the exact same day in all different parts of the world and things like that. So we can see it in animals. You see, how do birds, for example, how do they fly in flocks together? Why are they aligned this way without ever bumping into each other? And it's been studied, for example, that it's not just they're not just one reacting to the other. They are literally aligned to the same field. And that's synchrony, right? So it all resonates with the natural world.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I wanted to, before